everybody, Ellie here for WhoCulture and welcome to another video covering some Easter eggs. This week, of course, we are talking about the story and the engine. Before I start with the Easter eggs though, I'm just showing off my lovely t-shirt here, which you also can purchase if you just look below this video where you can purchase your very own WhoCulture t-shirt. And as I have said in previous videos, we will have more designs coming very soon, so keep your eyes peeled for those as well. It's so exciting. Anyway, shall we get on to some Easter eggs? Number 36. So let's start by talking about the writer Inua Ellams and the overall concept of this episode. Ellams is a playwright, poet, and former schoolmate of our very own Mr. Sean Ferrick, oddly enough. Now, his most famous work prior to working for Doctor Who was the play The Barbershop Chronicles, which explores similar ideas of the barbershop being a safe space for men, and particularly black men, to talk, share stories, and to be more vulnerable than they would otherwise be. Now, it was the Barbershop Chronicles that actually gave Russell T Davies the idea to have Ellams write for Doctor Who, with Russell T Davies's main idea being, what if the Doctor had walked into that barbershop? Now, the characters in the story and the engine are all brand new, and the story is of course original, but the play and the episode do have strong thematic connective tissue, and the play can very much be looked at as the original seed for this episode. Number 35. But sticking with the Barbershop Chronicles for a moment, the play and the episode are connected in one other significant way. Michael Balogun and Sule Rimi, who play Obioma and Omo in the story and the engine, both had roles in the play, making this episode something of a Barbershop Chronicles reunion. Number 34, and sticking with the idea of cast reunions, this episode was also a Doctor Who reunion for some of the actors. Sule Rimi, along with Arian Bakari, who plays the barber, have both appeared in Doctor Who before. Rimi first appeared all the way back in the 2005 episode Aliens of London as one of the unit soldiers who encounters Space Pig in the hospital, and this was apparently the first day of filming on the 2005 revival, so it's incredible to think that he was right there at the start of the journey. Meanwhile, Arian Bakari's first Doctor Who role was as the alien Leandro in the 2015 episode The Woman Who Lived, where he squared off against Peter Capaldi's 12th Doctor. And they're not alone either. Michelle Asante, who plays Abena, previously appeared in the 12th Doctor episode In the Forest of the Night, while Stefan Adegbola, who plays Rashid, popped up in The Magician's Apprentice as a newsreader. What a small world. Number 33. So inside the barbershop, the Doctor is amazed by the story window, noting how it throws up a visual interpretation of the story that's being told. And to test it out, he name drops a few villains: Daleks, Cybermen, and Weeping Angels, while later, when bolted into the barber's chair, he also mentions Weeping Angels again and Ice Warriors. Now, these are all iconic Doctor Who villains that have one thing in common. 15 hasn't encountered any of them, though you have to imagine that Ncuti will face a Dalek or two by the end of his run, and if he fails to do so, he'll be the only mainline modern Doctor to date that hasn't had a Dalek story. And we're not counting the 14th Doctor here, because come on, that's David Tennant and he's met tons of Daleks. And actually, while we're here, isn't it a bit risky to invoke the Weeping Angels? An image of an angel can become an angel, so the Doctor came very close here to making this a Weeping Angel story by accident. Number 32. Folks, it's your favourite time of week. It's time for Flood Watch! Flood Watch! Flood Watch! So this is Mrs. Flood's most fleeting cameo so far, showing up at the hospital where Belinda works to get her pills. Now, the most interesting thing this week is that she appears in a story that's being told by the Doctor, so perhaps this means that he is aware of her or knows more than he's letting on. Or this could just be a detail that only us viewers see. Either way, if Mrs. Flood appeared on the story screen in the barbershop and the Doctor saw her, that could be very significant. Remember that he has actually met and spoken to Mrs. Flood before in the church on Ruby Road, so he does know who she is. It's also interesting that Mrs. Flood is so devoted to being in character that she actually heads to the hospital to pick up some pills. She's not just putting on a show for the Doctor, she's living this life. Or maybe it's the companions that she's keeping tabs on for some reason. Now, there's also this theory that we've had for quite some time that Mrs. Flood is the god of stories, and maybe the ability to appear in this random story being told by the Doctor suggests that she has power over them in some way. I mean, on the plus side, with only one episode to go until the two-part finale, answers are imminent. So once again, let us know your latest theories in the comments, and we'll see you again next week for what could be an absolutely huge edition of Flood Watch. Number 31. So it's not just Mrs. Flood this week. There are quite a few cameos in this episode, including a whole bunch of past Doctors, but we'll get to those later on. The cameo that is easiest to miss is during the bustling market sequence where Belinda goes to seek out the Doctor. The merchant who confronts her and says she must pay for the items that she's knocked over is none other than the writer of this episode, Inua Ellams. Now, the idea for him to play this role started when he made a joke about it at one of the script meetings, and from there the idea swiftly became a reality. Although, considering that he's been a Doctor Who fan his whole life, I'm not convinced that he was joking. You were totally fishing for a cameo, Inua. Don't lie. And you know what? I can't really blame him, because I'd do the same. It wasn't me, okay? I want my chance. That wasn't it. Number 30. Continuing with the cameos, and we have perhaps the most surprising of the lot, Captain Poppy from Space Babies. This is the little girl Belinda encounters in the street, who swiftly disappears into thin air. Now, at the end of the episode, the Doctor chalks it up to stories leaking out of the barbershop and everything getting mixed up. But there is undoubtedly more to it than that. Now, what's interesting is that the events of Space Babies were essentially a story created by the ship. At one point in the episode, Ruby notes that it's a children's story come to life, while later on her suspicions are confirmed when we learn that the software created the bogeyman. So there's a clear theme here of stories coming to life, which again could then lend credence to the God of Stories idea. Throw in all the fourth wall breaks and things like the Doctor believing music to be non-diegetic and somehow having the ability to yell cut on Mr. Ring-a-Ding, and it all feels like it's leading to something big. Now, one crazy idea is that maybe the entire 15th Doctor era has been one big story created by a higher power like the God of Stories or Mrs. Flood. And alternatively, it could be something as simple as Captain Poppy being part of the Doctor's team in the finale, along the lines of his team in A Good Man Goes to War, you know, like his own Avengers assemble. Either way, let's hope Space Babies isn't too important. Number 29. So the Doctor is debunking the barber's claim that he's all those different story lords, and he mentions that he knows the Norse goddess Saga, and that they watched all the Marvel movies together up until Avengers Endgame. Now, first of all, it's funny that the Doctor stopped with Endgame, because perhaps that's when he knew that the quality of the MCU took a hit, as we all know as well. Endgame also released in 2019, which is the same year that this episode is set, so this could be a little nod to that and him not giving any spoilers of what's to come. But the funniest thing about this reference are all the ways that Doctor Who is connected with the MCU. First of all, there's the fact that Unit Tower is a clear rip-off of the Avengers Tower, so how hasn't the Doctor pointed that out yet, if he's aware of the MCU? And then, of course, there are all the Doctor Who actors who have had roles in the MCU. I can only imagine the Doctor's reaction when he saw Clara, Amy, the Dream Lord, the First Doctor, and the Ninth Doctor playing MCU characters. Not to mention one of the nodes from Silence in the Library in the first Thor movie, or Barclay from Planet of the Dead in Black Panther. Again, small but large world. Number 28. The barber is talking about all the places he gathered stories from when he was getting started with the Nexus, mentioning places like a candlelit pub and a church confession box. But most notable are his mentions of an electric cinema and a space opera, which are accompanied by visuals of the Palazzo Cinema from Lux and the robot's ship from the Robot Revolution. Now, these could be hand-waved away as nothing more than visual cues to illustrate what the barber is saying. But it could also be yet another hint of the 15th Doctor being trapped inside a story, or his era being one big story created by a villain or a god. This was very clearly a deliberate choice to get us all talking, but I guess we'll have to wait and see whether it's a red herring or whether it means something more. Number 27. The best cameo in the episode is undoubtedly Jo Martin's Fugitive Doctor, who we learn was the Doctor who encountered Anansi and his daughter Abena. Now, the Fugitive Doctor was introduced in the 2020 episode Fugitive of the Jadoon, and over several appearances we've learned that she was an operative for the Division, which is essentially Time Lord MI6. At one point though, she tried to desert her post and, as the name suggests, became a fugitive. That's really all we know about the Fugitive Doctor, which is presumably what her cheeky line, "I was busy in a different story that might be finished one day," is a nod to. It seems even the showrunners know how underdeveloped she is, so perhaps this quick cameo is a hint of further things to come? There's a neat little costuming detail here as well, because the Fugitive Doctor's standard multicolored shirt has been swapped for a plain orange one instead, which maintains more of a visual continuity with the Doctor's orange top. Number 26. The Doctor and Belinda make their way to the story engine, and there are a bunch of interesting items and artifacts scattered around the room. Now, visible on one of the shelves are the Ernest Hemingway books, The Old Man and the Sea, A Movable Feast, and To Have and Have Not. Hemingway is one of those classic novelists that you'd imagine would be perfect for a celebrity historical one day, although we do learn that the 15th Doctor has already met him, so maybe that opportunity has already passed. The idea of Hemingway and the Doctor telling each other six-word stories is somewhat rooted in reality as well, and draws on an old, if unsubstantiated, anecdote in which Hemingway is said to have claimed that he could write a short story in only 6 words. I'm born, I die, I'm born. I mean, that one will take some beating. Number 25. So a little later on in the scene, a much more unusual artifact can be spotted. A copy of the Jumanji board game. As seen in the original Jumanji movie from 1995, the idea of the game is that it sucks in and traps the people who play it. In an episode all about stories and stories coming to life, it's a very fitting addition. Props to the prop team for this one. Well done. Number 24. Continuing with the literary references in the scene, next to one of the TV screens is what appears to be figurines of Mole, Badger and Ratty from The Wind and the Willows. Written by Kenneth Grahame, The Wind and the Willows is a truly iconic children's book that was first published in 1908 and has continued to endure in the form of TV series, films, stage shows and radio productions. So it fits right in here in terms of being an important story for generations of children and families, just like Doctor Who itself. Number 23. More references to classic stories now, although this one is a lot darker in tone. It's only properly visible in behind-the-scenes material, but on one of the shelves is a piece of paper inside a typewriter, upon which you can see the line, "All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy," repeated over and over. Though that phrase has existed previously, its inclusion here is undoubtedly a reference to Stanley Kubrick's legendary 1980 horror film The Shining, during which Jack Nicholson's character Jack Torrance goes crazy and attacks his family. And in one scene, his wife finds pages and pages of the phrase, "All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy," typed out with a typewriter. Number 22. Also on one of the shelves in the engine room is a Disney connection, specifically the Enchanted Rose from the 1991 animated classic Beauty and the Beast. In the movie, the rose acts as the Beast's hourglass of sorts, requiring him to find true love before the last petal falls, lest he be stuck in his beastly form forevermore. Now, I'm not sure there's any deeper significance to its inclusion here other than it being another reference to a classic story, but the fact that it's a Disney story does make it a bit more notable, and of course, a big theme in Beauty and the Beast is books and reading and storytelling. Now here's a big chunk. We've got number 21 all the way to number 2. So the Doctor connects himself to the story engine and we get a good old-fashioned Doctor Who clip show. Now we've seen these a gazillion times before in episodes like The Next Doctor, The 11th Hour and The Timeless Children. And it's always fun to see which particular clips they decide to use. So where are all these clips from? Now the first clip is from the 1967 serial Tomb of the Cybermen, during the scene where the second Doctor and his companion Victoria discuss their families. The second clip is a brief shot of the third Doctor from the 1970 serial Spearhead from Space, which was the third Doctor's first story. Next, we jump to Modern Who and Christopher Eccleston's ninth Doctor, who delivers his iconic "Just this once, everybody lives" speech from the 2005 episode The Doctor Dances. And funnily enough, in the story in the engine, everybody lives. Now, sticking with Modern Who and sticking with speeches, the next clip visible in the background on a small TV is of the 10th Doctor's "I'm the Doctor" speech from the 2007 Christmas special Voyage of the Damned. Next is another modern speech, perhaps the greatest one of all. This is the 12th Doctor's incredible monologue on the futility of war, taken from the end of the 2015 episode, The Zygon Inversion. Now, given everything that's going on in the world today, I think this was perhaps the most intentional clip choice of the lot. The 13th Doctor is next, who is shown while the 12th Doctor's speech is playing in the background, and this is a clip from her final story, The Power of the Doctor, taken from the scene where she shares one final ice cream with Yaz on top of the TARDIS, and presumably sitting on top of Sutekh. 13 then gets a separate audio clip as well, the line, "When people need help, I never refuse." That can be heard immediately after the Power of the Doctor clip. This is from her very first episode, The Woman Who Fell to Earth, when she talks to Grace and Graham just before she builds her sonic screwdriver.
When people need help, I never refuse. When people need help, I never refuse.
Now it's interesting because this then means that 13's clips are from her first and last stories. The next clip is audio only and jumps back to classic Who for the 5th Doctor's line, "I'm definitely not the man I was," from the 1983 story The Five Doctors, which is heard just after he says goodbye to his previous incarnations.
I'm definitely not the man I was. I'm definitely not the man I was.
Then we see the 11th Doctor, who laughs at Amy's "the ultimate ginge" joke from the end of the 2010 episode Vincent and the Doctor. The scene then jumps to the barbershop itself, and on the giant story screen we first see an iconic shot of Tom Baker's 4th Doctor from the 1975 serial Pyramids of Mars, which was possibly a little nod to the whole Sutekh thing in season 1. Sutekh, of course, first appearing in Pyramids of Mars. Next we see Paul McGann's 8th Doctor from the 2013 minisode The Night of the Doctor, a clip taken from the opening scene where he appears on board Cass's ship. And this is followed up by a shot of William Hartnell as the 1st Doctor from the 1963 serial The Daleks. We then jump back to the story engine room and back to the 5th Doctor, who gets a visible clip this time, and it's again taken from the end of The Five Doctors, just as he watches his previous incarnations fly away in their TARDISes. And on the same TV screen immediately after the 5th Doctor, we see a clip of the 6th Doctor from The Trial of a Time Lord. This is the season-long story that comprises season 23 of the classic series, and it was as close as Doctor Who is probably ever going to get to a full-on courtroom drama. Then a few seconds later, we get a 14th Doctor clip hidden very sneakily in the background. This is a shot from The Giggle from right at the end of the episode when he enjoys an outdoor meal with Mel, Donna, and the rest of the Noble family. This shot is also visible later on behind the 15th Doctor. And then next up is the 15th Doctor, again nestled in the background behind Belinda. And this is a shot from right at the end of the Church on Ruby Road, which was also repeated in Space Babies, where the Doctor tells Ruby, "I'm the Doctor." Again, this shot is visible a little bit later on, tucked away behind the 15th Doctor. There's another 15th Doctor shot up next, and this one is literally 1 frame long. This is pulled from the end of the season 1 episode Boom, right before the Doctor and Ruby say their farewells to Mundy and Splice. Another sneaky one is up next in this same shot of the barber, and on the same TV screen as the Boom shot, this is the 1st Doctor's iconic farewell speech to his granddaughter Susan in the 1964 serial The Dalek Invasion of Earth. The only mainline Doctor not represented in this scene is the 7th Doctor, but thanks to behind-the-scenes photos we do know that he was present, he just didn't make it into the cut. The scene in question is from the 1988 story Remembrance of the Daleks, from the scene where the Doctor confronts Davros. And number 1. So right at the end of the episode, the barber says to Omo that he doesn't even have a name that people can trust, and so Omo gives him his father's name, Adetokunbo. Now in the Yoruba ethnic group in Nigeria, the name Adetokunbo symbolizes a clan or familial connection to nobility, and is also linked to how the Yoruba people strive to preserve cultural identity through language, music, and storytelling. One of the themes of the story and the engine is about finding somewhere to belong, and we see this in the Doctor's connection to Omo's barbershop, but also in the barber's desire to be recognized by the gods and to take what he sees as his rightful throne. The barber also lacks an identity of his own and tells tall tales about how he's all these mighty and fearsome story lords. So the fact that his new name can be linked to both family, nobility, and the idea of preserving identity through storytelling is a really, really lovely touch. And now it's time for the Quickfire eggies, which are basically just extra things that we notice that don't necessarily qualify as proper Easter eggs, but we want to mention anyway. First of all, another cast connection. Sule and Varada Sethu both work together on Andor as well. It was something of a major reunion on this episode. Next we have the word nexus. Nexus is the Latin word for connection, where multiple elements meet, and it has been used in various pop culture films and TV shows, and often refers to a place or a structure. It also gives us another Star Trek connection, because the nexus is featured in Star Trek Generations as this heaven-like realm in which a person's personal thoughts and desires shape reality. Also, doesn't the nexus look like the fairy circle in 73 Yards when the young barber is weaving it together? So we have mention of Anansi, Saga, Bastet, Dionysus, and Loki, all of which are gods associated with a form of storytelling. Although I have seen some criticism of the inclusion of Bastet here, who is more commonly known as the Egyptian goddess of protection, fertility, and cats. Thoth is the Egyptian god more commonly associated with stories, writing, and knowledge. Also, Anansi is also known as a trickster. That could be a fun connection. And there you go, folks. That's all the Easter eggs that we noticed in the story and the engine. Whew, that was a lot of doctors to pick out there. Make sure, if you want to, that you check out our lovely t-shirts too. It's so fun, we have merch. In the meantime, I've been Ellie for WhoCulture, and in the words of Riversong herself, goodbye, sweeties.